Willie D Live.
What's up, family? If it's your first time checking out the show, let me know what city, what state you're coming in from. If you're outside of the U.S., let me know what country you're representing. Throw up your flag. Family, I need you to smash up the likes, smash up the likes, smash up the likes. Also, if you have not done so already on YouTube, after you subscribe, there's a little bell next to your subscribe button. Go ahead and click that thing right now so you can get your notifications each time I drop a new video like this. That way you be in the loop. I'm going straight in, fam. People following the Nolan Wells case keep repeating three explosive words. BART did it. And there is no one who has said BART did it more often than this man that's on the screen right now. My man, activist Danny Collins is in the building. Hey, Danny, straight up, man, welcome to the show, first of all. What makes you believe this theory that BART did it? What evidence do you think supports it?
I think that there's a number of things. First of all, the very first thing that I saw was that they said that BART was out of town. Before this thing blew up, before it, became global, before it was nationwide, I don't, think that they thought this was going to leave the state of Mississippi. And, Nolan's mom made a cry for help and the internet responded. But in that response, you started seeing a lot of exchanges before social media accounts were deactivated. And there was one comment that I came across that basically was BART's page. And I don't know if this has been, I think this is a key part of, the investigation. It should be anyways, is that the comment was from BART basically saying, hey, I'm a friend of Nolan and I've actually wasn't in, I believe they call it Christian Pass or something along those lines, but it was that specific place in Mississippi. He says, I wasn't even there at the time. So, I mean, that was the first thing that, kind of was a red flag and gave me a question. But then all of a sudden now, all the social media, accounts are deactivated and they lawyered up. So nobody has confirmed whether or not that was, his social media platform. But that's the first question I had, that kind of led to BART, is that they placed him out of town immediately. And then all of a sudden, we find out that he was there. Also, in the CETO audio call, the second largest damning thing was "damn it, BART." Of all the things that we can hear clearly, that's the one part that we can certainly hear, the clearest, amongst "oh my God." Another part where it says, wake the fuck up. So I just think that there's a lot of questions surrounding this investigation. None of it really adds up. I can't say definitively BART did it because I don't have access to everything that, the law enforcement would have, but just based on what the internet has done, the internet sleuths have done, and the research that I've done, it just, a lot of it again isn't adding up. From the very get-go, like, what teenage boy is going to stay on an island 10 miles off the coast without a guaranteed ride back, without any communication, without a wallet, without a phone? Like, logically, none of that even makes sense. Like, especially a teenage boy. But I couldn't see any human being that is logically going to stay back without a guaranteed ride back. And if you went with a group of friends, they know more. They have to know more, right? Initially, it was, well, he just stayed back with the girl. That girl was allegedly Katie, but then Katie says otherwise. There's just so many discrepancies. So, the argument would be made that, well, the phone was placed in, a cubby hole or something for safekeeping so it doesn't get wet. But at that point, if he had made the decision that I'm staying back on this island and my ride is leaving, my only way to get back to the mainland is leaving, and I don't have another ride, and nobody else seems to know whether or not he had another ride, which doesn't make sense, then why would he not go with a phone? Why would he not keep a phone? So that in and of itself too, raises a red flag. And then the CETO call to me is damning. There's a lot of things even in the CETO call. I just, did a video on it to where at one point so now they've got this photo circulating the internet where they say that this is when they made the CETO call. And in that photo, you could see Wyatt sitting in, what would be the captain's chair of the boat, where the operator of the boat is. Well, on the CETO call, initially it starts with a lot of commotion. And you can tell that the caller, the person on the phone, which we know to be Wyatt, was not fully paying attention to Vicky, the CETO operator. He's
He's
confused.
distracted.
He's distracted. There's a lot going on. But at one point in time in the call, she asked him, well, what are your coordinates? And if he was sitting in that chair at that time, he wouldn't have to have said, well, all right, let me go look. When she said, I need your coordinates, he said, all right, let me go look, which implies that he was not sitting in that chair at that moment. And if we listen to the phone call a little bit before that, he's standing wherever the commotion is, because it sounds like, and I can't say definitively, I'm not a forensic expert. So, I'm just going based off my opinion. This is a theory. But I think that's what we do, is we construct theories and then try to disprove them, try to prove this wrong, make it to where this cannot be true. And in that phone call, it sounds like they're talking to Wyatt at the same time. This is before he gives the coordinates, because you hear him say, Wyatt, Wyatt. So he's paying attention to what's going on at the same time. They said, Wyatt, check his chest, is what I heard. And then she asked for the coordinates. Then he goes back and sits in the chair. And that would have been the time that the phone or the photo was taken, because that's where the coordinates are on a boat. They're right there where the seat is, where you're operating the boat. So if you're in a sinking boat and you're not aground, as the operator had asked, if you're not physically on that island, then who's manning that boat at that time? Somebody's got to be manning the boat. And it clearly wasn't Wyatt, because he's had to answer her and respond and say, let me go look. He also gave two different coordinates. So the first coordinates on the west, you can't hear the north because it broke up a little bit. When he gave the west coordinates, it didn't match the same coordinates the second time. So that would maybe say that they're starting to scramble and get out of there. You also hear in the background where it says, come on, let's go. And then on top of the coordinates not matching, he also, when she asked the depth of the water, he first says 17, then he quickly changes it to 31. Now, that could be a number of things, but he was obviously distracted. He's paying attention to two things at the same time. When he gave the coordinates, she sounded shocked. She said, oh, are you on Horn Island? Like, it sounds like you're on Horn Island, like directly on it. And then that's when she kept asking, are you aground? And he wasn't answering her at first, because he was obviously distracted with whatever was going on. And then now at this point, he's getting flustered. And he says, no, we're sinking. But I think this is the moment almost where he realized that we might be messed up, because in that part of the phone call with the CETO operator, he's paying attention to what's going on, the commotion behind him or underneath him or wherever he's standing. And he says, I don't know. After she repeatedly asked him, first she asked him if you need a Coast Guard. He doesn't respond. Then she asked
we don't
him,
need them.
yeah.
He
And
said,
then,
we don't need them.
then he says, what? Like, so he didn't hear it. Then she asked him again. So it was like he didn't even hear her. And then she asked him again, and then he says, no. And then she's asking him, how where's the water? Is it coming up? Is it up to your ankles? And he said, I don't know. We're going down. I don't know. We're just going down, though. So in that moment, I don't think when he said we're going down, though, that was meant for her. I think that the realization was happening with whatever was happening right there, to the friend group, that we're going down, though. Because the way he said it he sounded so defeated, like it hit him, But I can't say this definitively, it's, all this is just, the inferences I'm making from the evidence that's on the internet. But it's just a lot of stuff doesn't add up. And I think anybody, especially Nolan's mom and his family, they have the right to ask questions. We as the public have the right to ask questions and get answers. And who goes on a speaking tour, especially why are you going to just former Officer Tatum, to construct a narrative? Why not go to a Nancy Grace? Why not go to somebody who's neutral, um, who won't lead you in questions or try to construct a narrative or give you softball questions? Why not go to the people who will ask you the hard questions? And where are the answers to these questions? Because
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
heard nobody asked them about the comment on social media. Was that BART before
Yeah.
the accounts got deactivated? Does anybody know whether or not that was BART? Can they confirm that? Um, and I've heard the comments about the phone too, and Nolan's cell phone. And I can understand if a sheriff, within just hours of discovering the body, immediately says to the public that they suggest no foul play. If I'm the parent, especially of a black kid in the United States of America, especially in Mississippi, and they say no foul play only hours after discovering the body. From that moment forward, I'm going to question this investigation
Yeah.
and the validity of it and who's involved. Are there power players? I mean, the reality is that you have one parent who's a judge, you have another parent who's a doctor. So these are families that are well off. These are families that are well connected, and we know that Mississippi has a long history of corruption. We also know that Mississippi is is built on the good old boy system,
Right.
and um, I've seen it. I've been in the criminal justice system myself. Like I said to you before, I went from professional baseball in the Atlanta Braves organization to homeless in the streets, addicted to drugs, to getting incarcerated because of drug addiction. And
And that's
prior
what,
to that,
and that experience is what changed your mind. That
that's what
experience is
opened
what
up my
changed your
eyes
mind
to the
about the criminal
reality.
justice system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was one of the white people that would say systemic racism doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Stop being the victim. Pull yourself up by the
Let me
bootstraps.
stop you right there before I forget. What
Mm.
made you actually say that? Because I'm always appalled when white people say systemic racism don't exist. Like, what formed that opinion for you?
Well, because that's the way we're conditioned in a lot of white communities. I grew up in a conservative Christian community, and that's
And
kind of
from what age are you conditioned to believe that?
from all the way from when you're a kid. You're taught that everybody has the same opportunities. That was so long ago. Why are we still talking about it? But we're not taught the real history. We're taught a whitewash version of it. It's watered down, and nobody wants to believe that they're racist, right? Like, I didn't want to believe that I was a bad person or that I was racist, like, because people want to believe that they have good intentions and that they mean well. So for me, if you were to suggest that I wasn't racist in a way where I was like using the N word and like explicitly hated black people. In fact, I would justify my anti-racism by saying, well, I'm not racist. I have black friends, or I played sports with black people. Um, Meanwhile, I still bought into the tropes and the microaggressions and the propaganda that essentially almost suggested that black people are inherently criminal or violent. There's a lot of fear mongering. If you look back in the 80s of the news stations, what did you see on nightly news every night? You would see black faces plastered of being arrested and for violent crimes or burglaries or robberies and all these things, right? And you know it just so happened that I got caught up in the criminal justice system myself. And I, even early on in the criminal justice system, I would even look at myself like, well, I'm not as bad as those people. Like, I went to college, I played professional baseball. I'm just a drug addict, like, I need help. And I'm not a career criminal. And I remember actually I had an attorney that said to me that those people would give an arm and a leg to have half, just a sliver of the opportunities that you've had in your life that you've continued to squander. So, and that kind of hit me. And I can't say that I got it then. I didn't. Ultimately, what led me to believe it, to change my perspective, was that when I actually got into the criminal justice system and started studying the data and looking at the numbers and then looking at the history of it, I saw that, systemic racism is very much real. And that's what changed my entire perspective. I met a kid, not a kid, a grown man, but he was sentenced to prison as a kid. He was 16 years old when he got sentenced to prison. He's from my community. We grew up in the same community, and we weren't friends before then. And but he got sentenced to prison at the age of 16 for 20 years, followed by 10 years probation, for a crime in which nobody got hurt. Nobody was physically hurt. Now, it was a serious crime, But he was a juvenile. He's a kid, and he was the least culpable in the crime. There was some co-defendants as well. Um, and he was the least culpable in the crime, and he was the youngest. And the judge sentenced him to 20 years, followed by 10 years probation. And when I met him in prison, I would tell him, we got to stop being the victim. These are the choices that we made. These are the consequences to our actions. We got to own that, right? And he said, well, that's easy for you to say. He said that, when you went before the judge, you're somebody who had 14 felonies. I had one. He says, I went to prison at the age of 16. He says that judge looked at you as the all-American boy, somebody that played baseball, went to college. He said,
You
your
just made a
life,
mistake.
yeah, you just made a mistake. You just had mental health issues and substance abuse
A good
disorder.
person that did something bad.
Yeah, overall, I was a good person who did something bad. He said your life was worth saving. Your life was worth, redeeming. But he says that judge didn't look at me the same way. The judge looks at me like I'm inherently evil, inherently criminal, another black kid in the system, must have came from a fatherless home, like all the stereotypical tropes, right? And he said that, the judge didn't see my life as worth saving. He goes, I own what I did. I take accountability for it. But my entire life, in a case where nobody was hurt, 30 years of my life into the system, he says, that's the part that I struggle reconciling. And he told me to read a book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. And that book ultimately is what changed my entire life. And I started reading the numbers on it. And the 13th Amendment was the abolishment of slavery, except when punishment for a crime. And then crime became like the loophole for legalized slavery, in which you could literally just label somebody a criminal and justify treating them inhumanely. And if you just look at the numbers since the Civil Rights Act, since the Civil Rights Movement, we've had a 700% increase in our prison population. And I mean, if you look at a chart of it, it's crazy because it just goes straight up. But 1 in 4 black males carry convicted felon. At that time, it was 1 in 3 convicted felon label, 1 in 6 Latino males, and 1 in 17 white males. So I had to ask myself another question. Are black people inherently evil or inherently criminal, or is there something even bigger at play? And what's happened since then? We had the war on drugs in the 80s. We had the school to prison pipeline. And even the 94 crime bill. But we had all these laws and these things that started, although we couldn't legally discriminate based on the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which said we could no longer discriminate based on race. In 1965, Voting Rights Act, which said we can no longer disenfranchise black people. They didn't have to pass a literacy exam or pay a poll tax in order to vote, which prior to that they did. So if you think about that, that was just in the 60s, in order to still vote. So, but what group of people can you still do that to? Convicted felons. You can disenfranchise from voting. Most states have, voting laws against felons. Some states have gotten a little better with it now, but most of your red states are still very much tough on crime with voting rights. This would be the first election I'll be able to vote in. So disenfranchised from voting, you can deny education, you can deny employment, you can deny state licensing. In Florida, you can even get a barber's license as a convicted felon until 5 years completely done with everything, your sentence. Whether it's so for 5 years, if you're a barber and you just got out of incarceration, you can't even legally, you're not even allowed to get a state barber's license. Like, what do you want people to do? Commit more crime? So
now finish your point.
yeah. So when I started seeing all of this, that's what really opened up my eyes, was that, okay, there's something bigger at play here that the system is doing to deliberately marginalize people. And in the age of colorblindness, in the age of where people say, well, I don't see color, I just judge people by the content of their character, which we know is a farce because they haven't really studied the rest of what Dr. Martin Luther King was saying. But one thing about when people in the age of colorblindness is that I realized as a white man who got caught up in the system, that I was collateral damage in a system that literally wasn't even designed to target me. And that's why I was given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity before I finally got sentenced to prison, because I was arrested a bunch of times before, and granted, albeit there, a lot of them were, drug related and petty charges, but still, you know, I was given a lot more chances and than something like my friend Rashawn, who wasn't. And that's what opened up my eyes. And that's when I really started studying the system. And if you look at the Nolan Wells case, you can see another part of a two-tier justice system. I've been in county jails with people, and it's usually always a poor black man who, if they're trying to get them on a larger charge, let's say a murder charge, right? And they don't have the evidence to get them on the murder charge, they'll lock them up for anything petty, frivolous that they know that they've done. They could have a freaking taillight out or not stop at a stop sign and then pull them over and see a marijuana joint or something or a piece of a blunt, and they're going to jail on that, and they're at least going to hold them for as long as they can to try to get the information on what they want to really get them on. And but people like the what we see going on now, you had kids that were underage drinking, operating a boat while intoxicated, doing a number of things that there's potentially you could lock them up for, but they won't, because we know if their parents weren't judges and doctors, I believe they would have been locked up a long time ago for anything, because there's too many holes, too many things that don't make sense. And if it was a poor white kid or a poor black kid, or especially a poor black kid, but then somebody would have already been locked up by now, and then they would have separated them, interrogated them separately, investigated this separately. There would have been no time to corroborate any type of stories, and it threatened them once they got in them jail blues and had a brown paper bag with a bologna sandwich and a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and realized the reality of what's going on. They would have said, whoa, you may as well talk, because Wyatt, you may as well talk because Bart's over here saying that you did it, or Bart, you should talk because Wyatt's over here saying that you did it. So, and they would have, they would have applied pressure in a situation. Instead, they're going on a speaking tour, which, like, it doesn't even make sense to me. Like, half of the country, if not more, I even have Republican friends that are conservative that still say, like, this doesn't add up. I've gone to some of the people that I've grown up with my entire life, and I said, just frame it this way. If your son goes out on a boat, especially with a group of black kids, and doesn't come back, but they all come back safely, and then those people lawyer up, they deactivate their social media accounts, and they say that your son did not bring his cell phone with them, like, would that make sense to you? It doesn't. Logically, it doesn't make sense, right? You would want answers. You would demand answers. You would demand justice, and there would be no stopping. So, and I frame it to people that way. You look at the Daniel Irvin case in Texas, where he goes out swimming with friends. He's a competitive swimmer. The two juveniles that he's with says that he accidentally drowned. They take his clothes, they throw it across the tree line. This is a recent case too that Attorney Bancroft's representing. Throw it across the tree line, and then throw his phone after deleting stuff in the phone. Throw his phone, and then say it was an accidental drowning. And then when law enforcement questioned them about it, they say, "Oh, well, we knew there would be an investigation. We panicked," and all they got was a tampering with evidence charge. That's it.
There's another case out there too of T.J. Davis, who had a similar situation. His white friends, 4 of them, came to pick him up from his mama's house. They're supposed to go hang out and have a good time. They end up going to the Mississippi River, and he ends up floating in the Mississippi River dead. The 4 men who was with him, they end up in the backseat of the cop car while the rescuers are fishing his body out of the water. They're on camera. You can look it up. It's online right now. It's a video.
Mm-hmm.
They're on camera in the backseat of the cop car, laughing and cracking jokes as they're fishing for their friend's body. And after that, instead of the cop taking them to the police station, he takes them to one of the young man's father's house. Mm-hmm. The mama had to go around to the father's house and confront them and say, "Hey, where's my son? What happened?" They didn't even let her know what happened. So they didn't even let her know her son was even missing. It's crazy, man, how these people
how the mind works. Yeah.
It's crazy how they do that. I want to go back to something that you said. You was talking about BART and this is something I was talking about 3 days ago. I was like, what happened to Bart's inconsistent story of not being there? He said he
Mm-hmm.
was in Wyoming. Now all of a sudden, oh, he was there, but the conversation went away, like
Yeah,
poof.
nobody's
Like,
talking about
no,
that anymore.
nobody's talking about it. Tatum had a perfect opportunity to question him about that. Like, okay, let's clear up some inconsistencies. What do you think about? I mean, Bart, what was going on about with this you saying that you was not at Horn Island on that day, and when you were, were you just confused? Because Tatum gonna lead him. Tatum would be like,
Yeah,
were you confused? I think you was
yeah,
confused. Were you
yeah.
confused?
Yeah, he's going to lead him to the answer that he wants the general public to have. But like
Yeah.
these are like I can't say definitively that Bart did it, and I said that was my theory, and I said that in the video. But there are a lot of questions that we have for Bart. Even in the interview with Officer Tatum, they can't even say Bart's name. There's many times you can watch in the interview where they'll say my friend. They won't even say Bart's name, but it's Bart that
Yeah.
they're talking about. And why is that? And why has nobody clarified whether or not that was Bart's social media account? Because logically that doesn't make sense. We know, okay, let's say somebody says it's a bot or a burner account. Why would they construct that story right away? Who would know that? Who would know Bart? Who would know that Bart would be in Wyoming? Who would know that he plays football, that he's a punter? Like who would know this information to even create a burner account to make that comment? And that's why, there's so many questions. Also, Bart was the older one of the group, apparently, from what I hear. Even in the CETO call, I find it interesting that when they ask Wyatt about how many, living, breathing people on the boat, how many children, how many adults and children, he said no children on the boat. Then he says no adults on the boat. And then the very next thing he says, and she didn't even ask them, he just threw this out there. Nobody over the age of 21. Why volunteer that information?
Right.
Like, are you
Right.
associating being an adult with being 21 and not 18? Like, why are you volunteering? And Vicky even said, that's not what I asked you. The C2 operator said, that's not what I asked you. Didn't ask you if anybody was over the age of 21. I asked you how many kids and how many adults are on the boat. And we know that an adult, the age of consent in the United States of America is 18. So how many of y'all are over 18? How many of y'all are under 18? But he was so paying attention to what the heck was going on. Plus, they had been drinking. So, like, again, more questions that if you're an investigator or an attorney, why aren't you at it? These questions should be asked? And we're over a month later. And this doesn't even include the fact that the independent autopsy didn't send the throat. Like, okay, if you're saying it's an accidental drowning and you're the medical examiner of Mississippi, if it's an accidental drowning and you need to keep the lungs for evidence, why the throat too?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't you send the throat? So, and why
But
wouldn't you
she,
give them the opportunity? Because from what I heard with Attorney Ben Crump, is by the time that they got the body, they couldn't tell. It was already so decomposed. They couldn't tell if there was, bruising or more going on than what we know. So like, and that's why we still have an undetermined, and that's how the justice system works for privileged white people is that, we all have the presumption of innocence. These young men, not boys, young men have the presumption of innocence, guaranteed by the Constitution. But like, it seems like some people get like almost the guarantee of innocence. We're going to guarantee your innocence by making sure we create as many obstructions and barriers to this investigation as we can, that we create as much confusion and chaos as we can, because over a month later, it was 4th of July and there's still so many unanswered questions. And one question, okay, but question after question after question, like, that's not coincidental. At some point do we say, like, come on, like, what's going on? Yeah.
what's your strongest piece of evidence that Bart did it?
I mean, I would say the CETO call, and I can't say definitively that Bart did it. That's just my theory. So I do want to clarify that because I am objective, but my theory, as a content creator, as somebody that's, currently a criminal justice major and going to law school, is that I my theory is that he did it, and there's nothing that has been able to um, definitively say that it's not possible that he did it. And there's a lot of clues that would suggest that he could have potentially done it. The damn it BART is a pretty damning thing that we can hear clearly. Why are they screaming that amongst the other chaos that we hear in the background? Not only did Janetta Brantley break that video down, but also Nancy Grace, had her team break that down. So that, and then the literally the comment that allegedly came from BART's social media account. If BART's social media account responds to a comment at the onset of this, before it blew up, saying that I was in Wyoming and you were indeed in Mississippi there at that time, why? Can somebody answer that, please? Can we get some clarification on this? So that, with that, Bart's dad's a doctor. So he's going to be well connected to a medical examiner, as well as a sheriff's department and a governor. And there was another content creator that allegedly pulled up a picture of Bart's dad with the governor on a golf course. Has that been verified? What's the veracity of that photo?
Let's talk about that picture, because I verified that picture. I actually enhanced that picture, and it is Bart Senior on a picture with the governor and Elizabeth Edmondson, the wife of
Bart Senior.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's something that a lot of people don't know that I found out also when at the same time when I enhanced that picture. And that is that Elizabeth Edmondson was appointed to the Mississippi State Board of Health by guess who?
Mississippi medical examiner. No? Or the governor. The governor would do that appointment.
Tate Reeves. Governor Tate Reeves, who is in that photograph with Elizabeth.
Put her on the Mississippi Board of Health. Yeah, that makes sense.
With Elizabeth and Bart Sr., they're partners, man. They're friends. They're all together. This is one of the reasons why I suspect the governor was so quick to say no foul play. And by his own admission, when he was asked about it, he said, I haven't really paid attention to it. I don't really know much about it, but we don't suspect foul play. And why would he do that? Because he's trying to set up the narrative and get people to believe that, okay, if the governor's saying no foul play, then it's probably nothing to see here. So let us just leave this alone and go on about our business. Yeah. That's what that's about.
So that picture is real, though. That's not an AI photo or anything like that, because I haven't verified that. So
that picture's real, but check this out. You don't need the picture to make the connection.
Yeah.
You do not
because
need
of the wife. Yeah, because
of the wife.
Yeah, so you can silence all of the, playing devil's advocate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And trying to be as objective as possible. Yep.
He appointed the wife.
Yeah.
So
of course they're connected.
Bart Jr., he appointed the wife to the Mississippi State Board of Health in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the connection right there. That's indisputable. That's documented. That is in the books. That is real. So you can't dispute it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think of the picture. They have a relationship.
Yeah.
And that is a
well, the picture is the cherry is the icing on the cake. It's the cherry on top that shows that this really corroborates all of the connections, and it makes sense. Of course, there would be a picture if there's a relationship,
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I agree with what you're saying. The court of public opinion, though, you're constructing a narrative to put it out there to get people to dismiss us. They're hoping that we go away. That's why they're threatening the lawsuits too, and the defamation and all that other stuff. It's because they want this to go away, and they're thinking that the news cycle, the 24-hour news cycle, people will stop talking about it. Well, we're not going anywhere. But yeah, the court of public opinion, I think also too, that's why the sheriff said the same thing. Well, we suspect no foul play. If you got a governor and a sheriff, people in their positions of power and authority telling the public this, so early on in the game, then what's it going to do?
people who are tasked with protecting the public. They're supposed to be on the front lines while we're sleeping and while we're having fun and going about our business, while we're at work or whatever. They're supposed to be working on behalf of us to make sure that we're safe, right? To make sure that we have the things that we need to make us a conducive society, a productive, progressive society, all this type of stuff. So we give them the benefit of doubt because they have such a great responsibility. We give them the benefit of doubt that they know about these things. So if they tell us what their position is, we give them the benefit of doubt and we just run with it. So that is why what they say matters. That is why the sheriff says matters. That's why what the governor says matters. And they know that's why that matters. That's why they open their mouths in the first place.
Yeah, because words carry weight. Their words specifically carry weight.
Exactly. What part of the official timeline doesn't make sense to you?
Well, so they say the CTO call was at 4 o'clock, correct? The GPS data says they didn't leave until 4:31. So there's definitely some questions right there with that timeline. If you're not on the island itself, how are you on a CTO phone call and you say that you're not aground? You say that you're sinking. So if your boat is sinking, that means you wouldn't be on the island. But the GPS data doesn't show you leaving the island until 4:31. But you're on this phone call around 4 o'clock saying that you're out in 31-foot deep depth of water and you're sinking. So that right there obviously doesn't make any sense. We've heard from multiple other sources and eyewitnesses that there were fights going on at this time too. But that's not talked about enough because there was obviously tension. There was people drinking. There was a lot of chaos. There were fights. There was a fight on an island that we know of. And apparently something else. There was 2 fights from what we've heard and seen. So it's just connecting the dots from the timelines that they definitely don't add up. Also, this is something else that raises a big red flag for me is the alleged call to the Coast Guard. What time was that? 11 o'clock, I think I heard somebody say that night. If my friend is staying back on an island with a girl, I would assume that friend probably went home with the girl. And they've even said that in the videos. He said that in one of the interviews where he said, "Oh, well, I thought he was with the girl, on a couch sleeping somewhere." Well, if that's what you thought, then why would you call the Coast Guard? You're not calling the Coast Guard unless you suspect something nefarious or that you're trying to you really outsmarted yourself where you were trying to create a bunch of alibis, and a documented data of like what you did during this timeline and how it couldn't have possibly been you because you were doing this at this time and doing this at that time. With the CTO call and the other thing with the Coast Guard call, because if I really truly believe that my friend stayed on an island with the girl on the 4th of July, I would probably assume that he went and hung out with the girl the rest of that night. If it was that serious that he's not getting on this boat with me. And so he must have some intentions of, furthering that relationship or, whatever that may be, whatever that may look like. But I wouldn't suspect the Coast Guard, I wouldn't suspect a need to call the Coast Guard because why would I suspect foul play?
Well, they didn't have a need to call the Coast Guard either because he clearly said, no, we don't need them out here. He said, we don't.
Well, yeah.
Them.
Yeah.
And by the way, when he said, it's not just the fact that he said we don't need the Coast Guard. It's how he said it. It's like, it was almost, it's like dismissive, like, no, we don't need them out here. We don't need them. We don't need them to come. But
that was for the sinking boat. This other time that they allegedly did call the Coast Guard was for, and the Coast Guard said that initially that there was no call, and then somebody says, well, there was a call. That was later. That was for Nolan, being missing, quote unquote, missing. Or their words, they actually use gone. Like, why would you use gone? You didn't even use missing. Like, like he's gone.
And that's why it would have been important to put them all in separate rooms and grill them, because They absolutely would break. Yeah, there are people out there, man, that's 50, 60 years old that would break under that pressure. I know
Absolutely.
a bunch of wet behind the ears teenagers who still call their mother mommy.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
they'll break. I
Yeah.
know they'll break.
Greener than all outdoors.
And I'd go up in there. I'd be like, look, your ass going to jail. How many times do you know that you're gonna be in jail for 40, 50 years,
Yes.
50 years of your life? And when you get in there, they're gonna tell you a new ass. Literally, you don't understand. You don't understand.
That's what they'll tell them. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
they like pretty young white boys. That's what. Oh yeah.
yeah, they gonna like
Yeah.
I would, man, I whatever information they
That's what I
got, they
said.
gonna give it to me. And this is
Put the
another
fear of
thing.
God in them.
This is another thing that I don't get. So the Katie girl, at first they talked about Katie like she was a mystery. He went with some girl. He went with some girl. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's some girl. Next
Yeah.
thing you know, it's Katie. Oh, we know Katie. Allegedly, Katie had a relationship at some point with Bart. This is what was put out there.
Yeah.
Haven't been
They tried to
confirmed.
walk that back too, but that it's not adding up.
Yeah, haven't been confirmed by either one of
Yeah.
them, but allegedly they had a relationship. I saw some pictures with both of them. I don't know if that's real. You know, got AI, you can't tell what the hell is real these days.
Yeah.
However, it hadn't been debunked by Katie herself. She hadn't said, no, I've never dated Bart a day in my life. Bart hasn't even said, I have never dated Katie before, da, da, da. And so Katie, it appears to be the girl that he was talking to. Now, that right there, they were saying like this could have been a squabble because of Bart's affection for Katie and which they allegedly rivaled Nolan's affection for the girl. I'm not sure, but that argument also just went away. It wasn't debunked. It just kind of
went away. And that would create a motive, obviously. And it would also explain, the throat missing, probably putting somebody in a chokehold and not realizing, I think the chokehold would have been very intentional if that was what happened. And the autopsy should be able to show some of this that nobody has access to yet. But the chokehold would have been very intentional, but maybe not necessarily to the point of death, And I think that's where the panicking comes in, is that the damn it Bart was like, damn it, you held on too long, or you squeezed too hard, or something along those lines. And at that point, they're all feeling guilty and implicated. They're all drunk, underage drinking. That's the other thing in the CTO call where it sounds like, should I cover? At first, I thought the girl was asking, can we cover this up? But I'm almost feeling like that when I heard the Nancy Grace breakdown of it, can we or should I cover him up? Do you want me to cover him up? Like cover him up on the boat where nobody can see. If you look at the styrofoam cooler too, earlier in the day, that styrofoam cooler was in the back of the boat. The green one, that whatever color green one. Well, if you look at the picture during the CTO call, it's the person that's standing on the boat there on the side of the boat. The cooler has been moved to over top whatever's right there. Whatever's going on. That cooler's no longer behind where the captain's chair is, or where the driver of the boat would be. So if you look at the moving of the cooler, and at that point too, she's bent down, looking down at whatever's going on there. The cooler had been moved. Who knows what else, but again, there's just a lot of lapses in what's going on with this story. Is that, yeah, at first it was just some random girl, and then that girl was Katie. And I believe too, like that, again, if it was a chokehold or something of that nature, that it wouldn't have been. They don't think they would have meant to kill them, because if you intentionally meant to kill them, you'd have planned this out a lot better with a lot less chaos and things that you wouldn't have left so many holes in the story, because there's 30 holes in this story from the very get-go, leaving the phone behind.
Well, I got an uncle named Will who says that he don't trust criminals because he thinks all criminals are dumb, because they always miss something. He said
Mm-hmm.
criminals always miss something, and the younger they are, the absolute more that they're going to miss something. You were one
Yeah.
of you were one of the early people to have like really emphatic beliefs that Bart was guilty. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but what evidence actually connects Bart to Nolan's death?
Well, that was what I was saying. What I believed, what I heard was with the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
The Cito call, the damn it, Bart. The fact that Bart didn't place himself at the scene early on in the game from the social media accounts, which are now deactivated. And if you go to where that comment initially was, then that you can no longer go to that page. The comment's gone. So, um, why? Why would you place yourself in Wyoming or wherever you're going to college for football and not in the scene of the crime, which you were actually at? So that to me is damning, because anything that I've even studied, and I'm early on in my studies for criminal justice in law school, but a lot of the things, one of the things that you see a lot of times with people uh, who are guilty of crimes is that they usually try to place them somewhere away from the crime at the time. It couldn't have been me because I was not there. That's their alibi. 9 out of 10 times, that's what it's going to be. In fact, we were doing a case one time, um, and the girl was from Mississippi, and it was a black woman and a black man, and the black man was an immigrant from, like, I want to say Uganda, and he was a successful salesman at a Rolls Royce car dealership. Made a bunch, but he had a kind of like a player like vibe, right? And he had this girl. He made his Monday night girl, at his place where they would watch Monday Night Football together. They would sleep together, and that was it. And she wanted it to be more. She was a traveling nurse, and when they did that investigation, at first she wasn't a suspect. And one of the reasons why they said that she wasn't a suspect is because they said very seldom does the killer, the guy ended up dead, execution style, shot in the back of the head, and they found him in the bed. The sister called for a wellness check. This is a couple days later. By then, rigor mortis had already kicked in, and he's laying in the bed dead. And so then they look back on the cameras, look back at the records, see who he was hanging out with at the time, and the person who ended up doing it was the girl. And she almost got away with it because one of the things they said is that the killers normally don't place themselves there at the time, and she did. She gave enough truth just to, like, make it seem like there's no way it could have been her. And they ended up finding it because she threw the gun. Um, she drove a few miles and got rid of the gun. Just threw it out of her car. Well, somebody was sitting in traffic, and months later, and they saw it. They were stuck in rush hour traffic, and they look over and they see this gun, and they turn it into the police. Well, they ended up tracing the gun back to her, and the amount of time that it took to get from the apartment complex to that gun was 31 minutes, and they saw her leaving that apartment complex that morning. She left real early in the morning, around like 6 a.m. or something like that, and came back in exactly 31 minutes. And then they found the records, and she had told them that she had never shot a gun before or even owned a gun, and they ended up tracing that gun back to her. They found old records of it, and it was her. But the sheriff or the homicide detective on the case said that killers never placed themselves at the scene of the accident. So, like, that would have been one of the first mistakes. Like you said, criminals are dumb. The first thing you're doing, you're at the place, and now all of a sudden you're telling people you're in Wyoming. Like, why would you do that? Like, because that's going to be easily verifiable. They just didn't think that this thing was going to blow up the way that it did, and it did.
Right.
It went global. So I just think that's another thing with Bart, is that why would you place yourself not at the scene of this? Why were you not in Mississippi when clearly you were? And if that wasn't you, how do we verify this? How can we prove that it wasn't you? Because that comment's out there. It's floating on the internet. The damn it, Bart, and the phone call. Uh, Also, was the grandpa Bart's grandpa?
The grandpa was
Wyatt's grandpa? Okay.
Yeah,
And then Bart's dad being the doctor
yeah.
and his
Bart's
mom being
dad is
connected to the
Doc.
public health. That's the other thing too, is that he's got friends in high places and he has a lot to lose. You
When the
know, he's
governor, when the governor, when the governor appoints your mother to a position,
a
uh,
power. Yeah.
yeah, you got some juice. You
Yeah.
got some juice. What
Bart has
evidence?
the most to lose. His family has the most to
Yeah,
lose, right?
that's right. That's
Their
right.
family ties, their familial ties. His, granted, he's not a star athlete in the conventional sense of being, a star quarterback or a star wide receiver. But from what I hear, he was a pretty good punter and had potential of possibly playing in the NFL as a punter. I don't know, but
Yeah,
University of Wyoming is not like a horrible, horrible school. I think there's a couple of big names that came out of University of Wyoming, but anyways, yeah. So Bart has the most to lose, in my opinion. He's the oldest of the group. He was a college athlete. His dad's a doctor. His mom's apparently appointed to the, Mississippi Board of Health by the governor. So this family has very strong ties in the community, and it's a black mark. It's a black eye on the family, the legacy of the family and the name. Just think about what that does to all the relationships. That if your son is a killer or if your son takes someone's life, whether it was accidentally or not, you didn't accidentally put him in a chokehold if that's what you did, or so I do believe that if that's the case, then who stands to lose the most in all of this? And then also, who has the power and the juice to sway other people to keep this quiet, to put fear in them, maybe even have dirt on some of these other families? Who knows? Like, because this is all happening and this happened quickly. This whole thing developed so fast and it spun really fast. So, but if you're a family with power and you've got ties to a governor, then you might know some things. Like a lot of times people thought the Murdaugh trials in South Carolina, there's no way, right? It could be that deeply tied and webbed together, man. And they freaking unraveled that thing so bad. The Alex Murdaugh trials, or wait, was that his name? The guy in South Carolina, the guy that was like the
It's
attorney,
Murdoch.
and
I
yeah,
don't remember his first name.
Rob. Wait, I don't want to mix the two people, but yeah. So to say that like these small towns, especially with aff- affluent parents and affluential people, they definitely it's possible. The good old boy system is alive and well. The other things,
Alex Murdoch.
what was it?
Alex Murdaugh.
Okay, I said it right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I like to make sure I get my information correct. I don't want to. I genuinely try to be as unemotional and objective as possible when looking at this. It's a big deal, and people's lives are at stake, and I get that. But also, there's a young man whose life was taken, and there's a family that doesn't have answers, and there's a lot of questions and
That
things that
part.
don't make sense.
That part.
So, and we need to show that their lives are just as valuable as the lives of the doctor's kids, as the lives of the family that's friends with the governor, because they are. Their lives are just as important. And the
Well,
way they went after her at work and tried to go after her medical license and everything, it just shows the reality of the society that we live in. And, ever since I've started doing this work, how much hate I've caught in my own community, how much backlash that I've got, how much people have tried to come after me or hate and death threats. And it's just like, I get it because it's part of the territory of me speaking out. And when I put myself in that position, um, but that's just genuinely what happens.
yeah,
I like,
but when you're dealing with uncivilized mutts, so you gotta really put it in perspective. It takes an
mhm,
uncivilized mutt to target a grieving family who is totally innocent of
yeah.
in everything. It's just a grieving family, and you're mad because they're asking questions because they want justice. They want to find out what happened to their child, and that triggers you. So you go in and you attack them.
Exactly.
It takes an uncivilized mutt.
It takes a special type of, yeah.
Equally,
It's a
equally,
horrible, unempathetic person.
equally, it takes an uncivilized mutt to attack you a person who is just simply asking questions and seeking justice and want to live in a fair and impartial society. That it
Hmm.
takes an uncivilized mutt to take exception to that. So I think you should put it in perspective when you think about these people. In my opinion, when I think about them, the first thing that comes to my mind is fuck them. I don't
Yes.
give a damn about none of them. I don't care nothing about none of them. I don't care nothing about their children, their grandpappy, grandmammy, greats, none of them, because they are really what's wrong with this country. They are the
Yep.
worst of the worst that this country has to offer. It don't.
Yep.
It's not even close, man. So if I'm you, I'm gonna keep on moving the way I
Oh,
move.
I
I
have.
I did want to say this though. You mentioned earlier, you were saying like when you was talking about when you was on the MAGA side of things, right?
Hmm.
And you had this mentality that well, that's those people, not me. They commit the crimes and they're inherently criminals and all of that kind of stuff. Uh, this is what I try to understand with white people who think like that, and you no longer think like that, but at one point you did. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around how do you reconcile seeing the history of white violence around the world, right? Uh, every war that we've ever been in, a white man started the war. Every
Hmm.
single war we've ever been in, a white man started the war. Uh, for everything that's wrong with this country, you can point to our politicians who are mostly white. Most of our politicians are white, especially in Congress. 85% of our Congress members, I believe, are white males.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, and so when you see most of our serial killers are white, when you look at the statistics, you said you had to look at the statistics before you could really wrap your head around it. You finally looked at the statistics. What took you so long to look at the statistics and really like understand like, no man, I got it all wrong.
I mean, what changed me was reading that book and obviously the advent of social media, because social media gave me a lot more access and exposure to different viewpoints and perspectives that I had never been given. A lot of times we're insular. We're taught a whitewashed version of history. We've got a governor in Florida right now that literally made it part of the curriculum that Black people benefited from slavery and they should be grateful for slavery because it taught them trades. And if had not you been enslaved, you would have never been able to learn trades. And that's the narrative that is taught in many white homes, that it was like this harmonious relationship. So, and we're not really taught the gory details and all the horrible things that white men, we're always in these stories. And when we're the center of the narrative, we're the standard, we're the heroes, we're the morally superior people that are fighting for righteousness. And, all the Muslims and Arabs are jihadists and terrorists, and the Jewish people are God's chosen people, and we have to defend them at all costs. And that's what's taught in white families and white homes, in the white church, like that we're not taught any of those things. Imagine me having 14 felonies and literally facing prison, and in my head thinking that I'm not as bad as those people. Just how do you even like logically it makes no sense. Like, and I think that's why I was so conflicted for so long. I think that's why I stayed stuck, is because things didn't make sense to me. There was a point in time where I had lost my professional baseball career and I was struggling with addiction. And every time I would try to get well, they would just tell me, well, you just got to do it this way. Don't go to therapy. Don't, take medication. Just, you need Jesus and that's it. And that's great. That works for some people. But the Jesus that we're taught in our community is this white Christian nationalist Jesus, and I even went to the point of going to seminary school, and I started being a youth pastor at a church, but I didn't believe the things that I was telling. Like, it just, it didn't, none of it sat well with me. but I always wanted that acceptance and validation from my community, from people in my community, because people want community, and most people don't want to disrupt their social lives. That's why so many people are silent and complicit, even the ones that aren't like the nefarious actors. Let's just say the ones that are like that silently watch it, because there's a lot of those, right? They do it because they don't want to disrupt their social lives. I have these conversations every single day with people in my community, and that's exactly what they'll tell me, is that they don't want to disrupt their social life. They would rather not lose that relationship. And the cost to speak out in the white community is everything. I lost a marriage behind it. When I left MAGA, I lost a marriage, a home, my career. They told me to water down. They gave me the ultimatum. Them or stop. And this was at the height of the Black Lives Matters movement when I started my platform. This is like 5, 6 years ago. Um, they told me to stop saying Black Lives Matter or get divorced. That was literally an ultimatum I was given. Same thing with my career.
Your
Water down my message.
your wife told you to stop saying Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Do you have kids with her?
No. No.
Damn, you dodged
So
it. You
I was
dodged the bullet,
incarcerated.
man.
So for a lot of it, but we had been together on and off since I was 20. But she was diehard MAGA. And granted, she wasn't a criminal in the same way that I was, so to speak, but like she had her own business, but she was worried about me saying Black Lives Matter and standing up during that movement impacting her business because we live in a predominantly MAGA community. Most of her clients were MAGA. So when you start speaking out, it starts hurting your pocketbook too. And that's why most white people, even if you see a lot of white liberals, they'll go just as far as to where if it starts to impact their finances, they're backing off. I've got friends right now that supported Trump, people I've known my entire life that supported Trump, that have now agree that he's not a good person and that they should have never supported him, but they won't publicly say that because they're afraid of what it'll do to their business.
Mhm.
And that's the reality of it. Does it make it right? Absolutely not. It's sickening to watch it, because to me, I look at the racism, I look at all the injustice, and I liking it to it's just as bad as pedophilia. This is another conversation I had where I said, racism in America it should be treated like pedophilia, and they were like, "Oh, that's a little extreme." And I'm like, "It's not. You're denying people their humanity. Like
So they
you're
don't
treating
think
them as subhuman, as if you're superior, and you're not. Like we're not." But they don't see it that way. People don't see themselves as projecting themselves as morally superior. Like even in the height of my MAGA days, while incarcerated, I was a diehard white Christian nationalist, and in those moments, you couldn't have told me that I was racist. I would have been like, no, I get along with black people. I have black friends. It's just why can you have black pride and brown pride, but I can't have white pride? That was a big thing I would say, right? And I didn't understand that the core of white pride was literally birthed out of the oppression of black people, because I didn't know the history. I didn't study the history of it. And then when I did, it was like it was a faraway thing. It's not that bad. I didn't own slaves. I wasn't like that. That's the argument most white people would make. And that was slavery was everywhere in the world. You hear that all the time. Right. But nothing was like chattel slavery. Nothing where you literally enslave people based on race. I didn't understand that race, even the whole concept of race is a social construct, and why that was created. It was created to basically keep wealthy Europeans in power, because they knew that if they made these labels and you started labeling the poor Italians and the poor Irish and the poor English and Scottish, and you put them all under the label of white, you give them a little bit of perceived power, the right to vote, the right to buy and sell land, the right to enter into
perceived
contracts.
power.
Perceived power, the crumbs, but it looks like you got power. You give
Right.
them a little bit of whiteness became a social currency, and it still is for a lot of people. It's a social currency. It's what gets them in the clubs with the big dogs, even though they're not the big dog. They can every once in a while join the event, or they get the attaboy, the thank you
Yeah.
for your service for being a cop, or thank you for your service for being a military member, because look at the vast majority of people who enlist. It's white boys, young white 18-year-olds in the South. Um, look at law enforcement. You had cops. Long lineages of Italians, long lineages of Irish. Being cops. Families,
Mhm.
generations and generations of it is because they got the little bit of perceived power. They got a little bit of social status, and then the newer generation, people like me and people that are coming after me, to me, there's no excuse now, especially with the advent of social media and the internet. There's too much information at our fingertips. Like there's too much out there. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. But I don't want to make excuses for why I thought the way that I did, but I was just really ignorant. I was uneducated, but I did have a hunger for truth. Like I genuinely wanted to be a good person. I just at that time didn't have the tools or the information and the education to be that. And it wasn't until I stopped seeking that validation and that acceptance from those social groups to where I didn't care if I have to stand alone, if I don't have any friends, because you become an island. When you break away, if you grow up in an all white community that's basically a Christian conservative community, and then you start challenging these thoughts and these narratives and you go against them, then you get excommunicated just like you get otherized, just like if you were black or an immigrant or a gay person or a trans person or whatever that is. You get thrown into that group with them. And then it impacts you in every which way. Hurts you financially, it hurts you. So a lot of people don't want to go through that. So they would just assume stay silent, even if they don't feel like they're that themselves, they would just assume stay silent because it's convenient, it's comfortable, you
It's
know.
also complicity.
It is
So
complicity. And
silence is complicity.
yep.
I don't think it's enough to have white friends if your white friend is not actively doing whatever they can to lighten your load or lighten your burden uh, uh, in this country, like you would if your friend, like say for example, uh, any white friend that I have, if I know that they got a particular burden, I would try to lighten that load. I would try to erase that burden because that's my
Hmm.
friend. That's my
Yeah.
friend. So and I would take exception to anybody that's got a problem with this guy because this is my friend. I vetted this one. You know what I'm saying? I don't know about the rest
Hmm.
of them, but this one right here, this is my partner. This is my dog. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
if I call somebody a friend, that's my friend to the end, for real.
Hmm.
So it's not enough, in my opinion. It is not enough that, oh, my girlfriend is white or my boyfriend or my husband is white. If they're not actively doing what they can to fucking dismantle this institution called racism. If they're not, and I'm not saying everybody got to go out and throw up the fist and hold a sign, but there are other ways that you can contribute to the movement, and that is by what you doing, like what you're doing right now, speaking out.
Yeah.
Educating people. You can do it by um, joining causes or donating. You can do it by, if you're a manager or a supervisor, you know uh, you give that black person that come in there a fair shot at getting the job, the same fair shot, same fair opportunity that you would anybody else. You don't look at a person's name and throw that application in the trash can because
Hmm.
it sounds
Like
black.
a black
And
sounding name.
if
Yeah.
somebody do it and you know they're doing it, you're supposed to say something. You see something, you say something. If you're a
Hmm.
police officer and you see another, if you say you ain't about that life, you ain't like them, well, prove it. Don't let them abuse people. Don't let them tread on people's civil liberties.
Hmm.
If you are a true ally, then you have to be active. You got to activate that.
Hmm.
You can't just be saying, well, I'm cool, I'm not like them because I don't use the N word, or I
Yeah.
don't I don't go out of my way to try to harm black people. I don't want to see them get hurt, but if they do get hurt, I'm not going to say anything about it because, I don't want to lose whatever little piece of position that I have,
Hmm.
in my friend group,
Yeah.
uh, so that's a big problem to me.
It
If
is.
yeah, if you had let's say you were in front of investigators right now, what would you tell them to investigate about BART?
Well, definitely the social media post. Why would he say this? Um, I mean, I would investigate the family and the ties to the governor, and that's going to be tough because you're going to have an independent investigation of law enforcement that's not up underneath him. You would need almost like FBI involved in this, and even then, you got to question that a little bit because of who we have currently in office. So, I mean, these ties run deep, and I think that's all intentional. I think we have a movement in this country that's trying to take us back to that place in time, and it's obvious. But I would definitely be questioning um, Bart. I would want to see his phone. I would want to know um, why are they not taking polygraph tests. That was another question that Nancy asked. I would want to know about the CETO call. This we need some type of forensic expert on this. We need to know what happened to Nolan's throat, the autopsy, in the lungs, and then even allegedly that was leaked to Chris Cuomo, who's a right-wing conservative talking head. You know, why would you leak autopsy results to him to where he could start to construct a narrative as well? But so yeah, if
What happened to
that's what
Chris, man? What happened to Chris Kumo? What
I
happened
don't
to him?
know, I don't know.
Is it Kumo Como? Kumo. It's Kumo.
Cuomo, Cuomo,
Yeah,
Cuomo.
see, I know how to spell it, but
Yeah,
I can't pronounce it properly.
Cuomo. I think it's
Kumo.
Cuomo.
Okay,
Cuomo.
what
I
happened?
could be wrong.
He seemed to come off at he seemed to be all right a few years ago, but then I think he got fired, and then after that he started working for somebody else, and then after he kind of just went off the rails. What happened to him?
Yeah. Well, I think you see a big push in the media right now that I think there's a big fear with these media conglomerates of this. They're using this DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, as like harmful fear mongering rhetoric, and I think you're seeing that with media where they feel like they're under attack, and they also fear Trump. You know, so I think a lot of them are trying to stay in line because they care more about profits than they do people. They care more about um,
Profits over people.
upholding a system instead of challenging the narratives. And let's explore ways to make this world better for everybody, make this country better for everybody. And if that includes challenging our current economic systems, then let's do that. Like, why not, you know, overturn every stone? And I think that I think that there's a lot of white people in power right now, especially mediocre white people who couldn't make it on merit alone that are grasping for that power. And they know that if opportunities are started to be given to everyone else in the way that the tide started to shift briefly, before we got Trump again, and now we've just seen a rollback all over again. They know that there's a lot of white people that are going to lose their positions of power. You're talking generational legacies of generational wealth that they've accumulated through exploitation and oppression. And when you start to break up some of these dynasties of families and that are controlling all of these institutions in small towns across America, this is a perfect example of another small town where white families have all the power and the influence, and they're affluential, and they're doctors and judges, and they kind of control the narrative, and they control even how things are investigated, how crimes or potential crimes are investigated, how deaths are investigated. Like this, it's wild to watch it play out. But um we're seeing a lot of that. And I think you said something about like actively speaking out. I remember that when I met my friend Rashawn in prison, to me, he was like no other person I'd ever seen. He had been in prison for, almost 20 years at that point. And since he was 16 years old, and he stood on his own 2 feet, he was just you just watch him, he's such a solid person, right? And he didn't get caught up in the prison subculture. And I did, I was caught up in all the BS in prison as well and doing everything that I probably shouldn't have been doing. And, and I was really like, I would watch him move, and I was just like amazed that here's this person that's been in prison pretty much his whole life. He didn't get to graduate high school, he didn't go to prom, he didn't get a driver's license, none of that. And I told him and I became friends, and I told him, I said, well, I was getting out before him, and I said, when I get out, I'm gonna keep in touch with you. And he was probably like, yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Well, he
Yeah,
did tell me that because people say that all the time.
right.
And I did. And I raised money for him to get a lawyer for an appeal because his brother had an appeal, and his brother was on the case, and he was granted commutation of his sentence, and his brother was far more culpable than he was. But they just happened to have two different judges in our circuit, and the judge that Rashawn got didn't give the same benefit of the doubt that the brother got, even though the brother was the one that was more guilty. The brother was older, and it was he was the possessor of the weapon in the charge, which nobody got hurt. There was nothing physical, nothing happened, but there was a weapon involved. And Rashawn was just kind of like the lookout that stood outside of the car, and he didn't get the commutation of sentence. And they did an investigation on the judge here in our circuit, in the 19th Judicial Circuit, and all the data showed that like black defendants were getting anywhere from 4.5 to like 6.5 times harsher sentences than white defendants for same exact crimes. My counties, I don't know if you ever saw the thing circulating the internet where there was a white kid and a black kid. The black guy's name was Lamar Lloyd, and the other guy's name was Chase Leidinger or something like that. And they both had armed robberies. They both had the same exact score sheet, the same exact points, the same exact previous history. The white guy got 2 years, which he did in the county jail, and then the black guy got 26 years in prison. I'm talking about the same judge, same courtroom, same score sheet, same month, like the same time too, like all in the same year, same month, same courtroom, same exact to a T, to not even a point off of the score sheet, what you score out for prison that they use, as well as the previous history. They had the same exact previous history charges, like one misdemeanor each. And the black guy got, and you know what their argument was? That the black guy didn't show remorse like the white guy did. And the black guy had robbed, I think it was a Pizza Hut, and the white guy had robbed a drug dealer, which was a black guy. And they said the victim mattered, like, of who you rob. Like, the crime is a crime. If you commit a crime, you committed a crime. I don't care if you rob a homeless person or if you rob the Pope, you know, like if you're robbing somebody, the crime is the crime, in my opinion. And not everybody can show remorse the same way, or some communities, you know, are depending on where you are. Like, if you can't bond out of the jail, you're not going to go before a judge and cry and then know you have to go back into jail and get preyed upon or something, or go back into your community, whatever that looks like. So like, but to judge a 24-year gap based on that is just mind blowing to me. So that was the same judge that denied my friend Rashawn his habeas corpus. But I ended up raising money for him. We raised like $20,000 for him to get a lawyer, and that's what kind of started me in this work. Was that because I told him, like, I'm gonna hit you up. And then when he got out, so I'm the one that picked him up from prison. You know, I went and picked him up, and so, and we still have a friendship today. Like, he helps keep me in line and because he's so calm. Like, I'm I'm full throttle, and he's so calm, and he's so like he really thinks things through before he speaks. And he doesn't talk a lot, but when he does, everything he says is so profound. And so we still have a friendship today. And me and my girl invited him and his girlfriend to an event that we went to in Orlando, this charity event. And I remember him saying that he was so nervous, right? And it was going to be a bunch of white people, and it was like a charity event to raise funds for foster care youth. And I was running a little bit behind because we were working the event too. My girlfriend and I were working the event, and we were doing like the floral arrangements and stuff for the event and some of the decor, right? Well, I had to go back and change and go back there. Well, he was also driving up there, so he was a little bit ahead of me, and he said he was so nervous and he was concerned, and I felt so bad because like the reality, and I was telling my girlfriend the reality of a black man going into a space alone with a bunch of white people he doesn't know, and how fearful that can be for people. And not everybody else understands that. Most white people will be like, oh yeah, it's nothing to worry about, like, oh, we'll love them, welcome, arms wide open. But like, you can't diminish that fear, you can't dismiss that fear. And he ended up having a great time, and we ended up getting there. I actually got there before him. I beat him there, but that was just a reality. He had shared that with me because he kept texting me and calling me. He's like, I don't know, man, I'm nervous. And I get it, being in a space filled with white people, you don't know how they're going to be in at an event like this, and you're fresh out of prison. And but I assured him, I was like, believe me, the people that I deal with today aren't going to be those type of white people. I won't even be around them. Like,
But
um,
you know what crazy, Danny?
mm-hmm,
The trip part about it is not in that situation, but in general, the safest place for a white person to be is in a room full of black people. The,
mm-hmm,
the most dangerous place for a black person to be is in a room full of white people. If they're by themselves, if they're the only black person, that is the most dangerous place. Like I say, there are exceptions, but I'm saying the rule
yeah,
is you do not be the only black person around a bunch of white folks because you don't know who got it on their mind. Some of
mm-hmm,
these people are uncivilized and they got a fixation with harming black bodies. We don't have that fixation about harming white bodies. We don't have that fixation.
mm-hmm.
I've seen it time and time and time again. I've seen white dudes. I brought white dudes to the hood, and we went to the club in the hood or wherever, and they were a little nervous about going, but they were with me, so they wasn't worried about somebody trying to hurt them or whatever. But when they get there, black people, we kind of like make it known that look, we let it kind of be known that no, man, we don't do that around here, man. Like if we get on you, if you get your head beat in, it ain't gonna be because people just targeting you. You got to
Mm-hmm.
do something to us. You gotta, like, white people gotta really, in most cases, white people gotta do something to us. Put do
A
something
lot
to us
had to have happened. Yeah.
to make us want to be violent toward them. For many white people in this country, they have an inherent sense of violence towards black people. They got this thing. It's almost like they get initiated early on and say, okay, you're gonna have to hurt a black person if you really want to be able to have the true white experience in America. It's your birthright to harm black
Wait,
people.
it
How
doesn't
much
go
of
like
that?
that.
It seems
Yeah.
like, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it seems
No,
like
it's, you know what it is
that's
though? You're
yeah.
onto something. No, you know what it is that white people are almost conditioned to fear black people. And when people, we know what people do when they're fearful. When they feel like they're afraid of something, that's when they get nervous and they make dumb, decisions and do things. So it's not that there's so much taught that to cut. There are probably some families, that teach their white kids to explicitly don't like black people, but I have white people in my community right now who won't date a white woman if she's been with a black man. And that they're taught that's generationally gets passed down, right? And it's this fear, and that fear makes people do really dumb shit,
But what
like
is the fear though? What is the fear that she dated a black man? What's the fear?
that
They
that that
it
that
didn't work
that
out. What is the fear there?
the fear is probably of being inferior, of
So the
being.
fear is that he opened it up too much, and now it
Yeah,
ain't gonna
that's
fit.
exactly what their fear is, and they'll
Oh,
say things like they'll even use terms like like radiator hose. Like, so, and that's a real thing. That's a real thing. I got a friend now whose wife, he cheated on his wife. She found out.
uh,
She left him, and she's now married, dating a black man, and he was upset. But he also knew that he shouldn't be upset. Like logically he knew, but physically it made him ill. And he
yeah.
had to come to terms with understanding why he felt that way. And I walked him through it. I did, because generationally he's been taught that, and it's been passed down from generation to generation. And there's a author by Resma Menakem, and he's a black author. He wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands. He also wrote a book on quaking and the racial reckoning, but he talks a lot about like the nervous system and how it the somatic process of it being literally in your DNA, in your body, where they feel it. Like it's a visceral experience of like when they see a black person, of having that fear, and it's been passed down from generation to generation to generation in the bodies. And that's why white people respond in the way that they do, because even if logically they know better, they know it's wrong, they know that it's racist, they know that they shouldn't feel this way, but they can't help the fact that they physically feel that way. And they have to find a way to get this to match the way that their body feels. And once they do enough work, you can get to that place. But I mean, it was a very real thing for me because I was always conditioned to be that way growing up, not just thinking that like that there was some type of difference in um white people and black people. And that's why you see a lot of white people thinking they're going to like countries like Africa and trying to like do these mission trips and stuff and convert them because they feel like they have to do charity for black people, almost like black people aren't capable of
Call
taking
that,
care of themselves.
call
Yeah.
that white guilt, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is my thing, Danny. This is what I'm trying to like. I try to be like put myself in the shoes of other people, right? Just to
Hmm.
see, just to try to get an idea from their perspective, right? And so I just find it very difficult to wrap my head around the fact that uh, even though many white people get taught that they are superior early on, like I don't understand how they can buy into the belief if they can't fly, they can't flap their hands and fly. They can't they can't just snap their thing and disappear. They can't they can't walk on water. They can't walk through the wall. They if something punctures their skin, they're gonna bleed. They catch colds. They get old. They get gray hair. They
Hmm.
get wrinkles. They die eventually, just like
Hmm.
everybody else. What is superior? Like
Nothing.
what is where does the superiority part come in? Because if white people could fly, I'd be scared than a motherfucker. If you could just do this and shit, I'd be like, oh shit, that motherfucker can fly. If I could pop, 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 and you do this here, knock the bullets down, like I'd be like,
And dodge every one of them.
I was like, man, say, man, you don't know what you're talking about. White people superior.
Yeah.
I'd be on some different type of shit, but I don't think that way. I've never thought remotely that way. This is why I don't get the Officer Tatum types. Like I don't get those types, man. And that's why I judge people based on the content of their character for real. I seriously, because I've had black people that did me dirty than any white person has personally done me. So if I'm going to hate people based on just the color of their skin, I'm gonna run out of motherfuckers to love or care about. Because like that means if I'm gonna be serious about hating people for something they did to me, if I'm gonna be serious, let's say one white person did some dirty stuff to me, and I say, I hate all you motherfuckers, I hate all y'all. Well, how much sense does that make if a black person do something really dirty to me, and I say, I'm hating all you mother, I'm putting cases on all, I can't stand none of it. I'm gonna run out of people
To
to
love,
hate.
yeah.
I'm gonna run out of people to love, to care
Yeah.
about. So it don't even make sense to me. It seemed like the stupidest shit ever. So when I see a person acting racist, I look at them like they're beneath me. I don't give them no, like, when I look at them, I see filth. I see an uncivilized mutt who ain't even worthy of standing next to me. That's what I see.
Yeah. Well, what's funny about Officer Tatum, former Officer Tatum, is that a lot of white people tokenize him the same way they tokenize Candace Owens as like the model black person. And this is what all black people should be like, right? And he buys into a lot of those narratives, those racist stereotypes. Like there's two types of black people. There's those ghetto ones, and then there's the good ones. And he considers himself one of the good ones. He literally used the language ghetto to describe a black woman the other day. I was
He
listening.
said that about Teslin.
Yeah, Tesla.
He was
Yeah.
all the way out of pocket with that.
Yeah, and
He don't-
that's exactly what white people say though. That's what
Yeah.
white people will believe, that there's ghetto black people, them N-words, and then there's the good ones. And then but the way they try to justify that is they'll be like, well, there's white people like that too. There's white trash, those poor white trash, and then there's the good ones. And
Can't tell Tatum that.
Yeah,
not
well,
tell
they.
Tatum it's the poor white trash out there. He gonna, man,
So
he might
then,
pull out a gun and cap you.
but the reality is, people are just people, and if you choose to be racist, or buy into it's profitable for Tatum, for Brandon. It's probably, I'm not even calling him officer anymore because that gives him too much credit too. Because I think that's them going on a show like he's a real officer. No, go speak to a real officer. Don't speak to Brandon anymore because we ain't buying it.
Well, I don't feel one way or another him calling himself Officer Tatum because a lot of officers are uncivilized much. A lot of a lot of officers are thieves and they're corrupt, they doped up, coped up, they steal, they lie, so I don't, so he really can keep that title as far as I'm concerned. It ain't got no respect on it for me anyway.
Yeah,
I know what it means. It does has
we
authority.
know. Yeah,
I
but
know
for
it
public
has.
perception for white people.
Yeah, but I know it has an authority. And that's why he uses it because
Yeah.
it makes white people feel safe.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
why, and that's why I say he's doing it for the white folks, and it gives them
yeah.
credibility. So and that's why I don't like it for this specific thing with Bart and the boys, Bart and the boys. There is that these men that are going to be charged like men, but Nolan Wells, um, you know, the alleged friends that they claim to be is that when he labels himself Officer Tatum and they go on the show, what that does in the credibility of the followers and the supporters, it gives credibility to he's some type of authority, like he's an authoritative voice on this, he's an officer of the law, and and it must be they are innocent because they are speaking to this officer for the whole world to see on national television, essentially, to see that, who's going on a show with an officer of the law if they're guilty of a murder. And that's the public perception that they want to create when he's just a podcaster like the rest of us. He's not, and he's definitely never been like a homicide detective or anything anyways. He was like, even when he was in law enforcement, he was a public, spokesperson. So like, and that matters because it gives this another perceived credibility, this illusion of status that isn't real. And so I caught myself because I was calling him Officer Tatum because that's what his handle is, and I'm just going by what the handle is. But the more people would say, "Stop calling him an officer. He's not an officer." The more I thought about it, I was like, "Well, you know what? You're right um, because it gives more credibility to something that he's not really credible of in this situation, especially is that he's not an authoritative voice on this. He's not an investigator. He's not a law enforcement officer any more than any of us are. And his voice and his construction of his narrative is not carry any more weight than what any of us have to say about this. So, and I think that's important to clarify for the viewers out there is that a lot of white people will be like, oh, well, he's an officer, so it must be legit. The same thing with the sheriff that said no foul play and the governor that said no foul play. Like those words carry weight because he has that officer in front of his name and he's not even an officer. So,
we all know that he's not legit, but
yeah,
guess who
the white
is?
folks.
Guess who is legit? Danny Collins. Yeah, that's what's up, man. I've been watching you for a long time. I've been wanting to tell you that, man. I've been watching you for a long time. You are consistent. You are authentic. And that's why I rock with you, man. And that's why I wanted to have you on the show. So I appreciate you coming on the
I
show.
appreciate you.
Your wisdom, man, and your theories that I think is a plausible theory, bro. A lot of people feel the same way that you do. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
All
Ladies
right,
and gentlemen, Mr. Danny Collins. Yeah, fam. Let's go into the comments. Let me see what y'all saying. Let me see what you're saying. China Carter in the building. What's up, Jennifer? I see Shay Jr., Swamp Life. Who is this? Tracy White, Catherine Artis. Who is that? The Truth Dare. Yeah. Grace Vines. Sonia, what's up? What's up? What's up? Belinda, Dee Dee, I see you. Mose, Low Skrilla. What's up, Nita? Let's see. Tatiana, Buckhorse 10. What's up? Take that cap lock off, player. Buckhorse, man, I'm about to put you in. I'm about to put you in. What does the chat have where you put somebody on ice? I got to put you on ice for a minute. Yeah, we keep on dropping these caps, man. You know the rules. So, what's up, Soul Vibration? Patricia, I see Jam on it. Jam on it. Jennifer, what's up, Jennifer Lovelace? Pamela Brown. Dee Dee, I see you. What's up, Larry Law? Honey Houston. Everyone is asking the guest name. His name is Danny Collins. You can follow him on TikTok at Danny F. Collins. Danny F. Collins. You can follow him on TikTok, Danny F. Collins. He is extremely active. We got Stephanie Thorne. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'll do y'all one better, fam. I am going to put his TikTok link in the description. So, boom, there you go. We got who is that? Emily Brown. What's up, Emily? Finesse. Curly W Express. All right, fam, that's my time. But before I go, I need to know what y'all think about this. Who believes BART did it? Give me a thumbs up if you believe BART did it. Thumbs down if you say, no, man, I don't believe that, man. That man ain't killed nobody. Thumbs down if you don't believe. Give me a thumbs up if you believe he did it. Thumbs down if you say no. If you say no, give me a thumbs down. I do want to say this, though. BART has not been, he has not been actually charged with anything. He has not been charged with anything. He has not been charged with causing Nolan Wells' death. So my beliefs, Danny's beliefs, your beliefs should really remain clearly identified as an allegation rather than an established fact. My lawyer told me to say that. I was going to say something else. But anyway, fam, that's my time. I appreciate y'all joining the live. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. No more talk.